In 2003, South Korean master Park Chan-wook made the trippy story of a vengeful man, Old Boy, into an award-winning film.
But it was based on a Japanese manga of the same name, written by Nobuaki Minagishi and Garon Tsuchiya, and released in 8 volumes in the mid-90s.
And then it was remade by Spike Lee in 2013. But here's the thing, I don't want to talk about that one. So, without further ado and no restraint on spoilers, I'm Clint Gage.
And I'm Michael Trulli.
And it's time to ask, what's the difference, old boy? If you watched our episode of movie lists about adaptations, you'll know that we're big fans of this one. Old Boy is an interesting adaptation in that many of the mechanics of the plot are still there, but their repercussions are very different. And most of the characters are essentially the same, but their motivations are wildly different.
Both mediums feature a complicated mystery of who locked up the protagonist and why. There's an enigmatic rich guy who's tormenting him, an old friend from his past helping out, a young lover he meets at a restaurant, and a fair amount of post-hypnotic suggestion, all of which play out in very similar ways in both the film and the manga.
So, starting with the main character in the manga, we follow Goto, an average workaday salaryman in Tokyo. One day out of nowhere, he's kidnapped and held in a room for 10 years with nothing but a TV to keep him company. As the story progresses, we find out Goto always went out of his way to keep to himself. In fact, he never felt very at home around people. Like there was something lurking under his surface he didn't want anybody else to see. The fact that he didn't interact with too many people made the concept of somebody hating him so much they'd lock him up for 10 years almost unfathomable. In the film, we have Oh Dae-soo, who's in the bizarre solitary confinement in South Korea for 15 years as opposed to 10. First time we meet him is at a police station, drunk and combative, and further into the story we'll find out that he was also a womanizer who slept with countless married women. For Dae-soo, the issue is not how could somebody hate me this much, it's man, it could have been anybody that hates me this much.
But in both the book and the movie, with zero explanation, the protagonist is drugged and released back into the world in the standard way prisoners are released, inside of a suitcase. In Goto's case, it's in the middle of a scenic park where he immediately feels a sense of freedom that he'd been missing. Dae-soo, meanwhile, in the film, is on the grassy top of a building where he immediately meets this dude with a dog who's about to kill himself. And this is where the film really starts to deviate from the manga. Goto feels freedom, relief from being cooped up for so long. There's even a tinge of excitement in his mood, because now he gets to do the thing he's been dreaming about for so long: kill the motherfucker that locked him up.
Dae-soo, meanwhile, is desperate for human contact. After 15 years of total solitude, even this guy who's about to pitch himself and his dog off a roof seems like good company. But it's clear Dae-soo went crazy while locked up. He saw some real weird shit in there.
Goto, however, seems to have hung on to his sanity. While Dae-soo went nuts punching walls and hardening himself for the day he was released, Goto was much more focused in his training. He made the decision after only a few months that this experience would not defeat him. Gradually, and even to his guard's surprise, the dude got ripped. Becoming hyper-focused on revenge very early on in his stay on floor 7.5 allowed Goto to stay sane, and as a result, he's less of a wild animal upon his release than Dae-soo.
But who locked him up in the first place? In the film, it's Lee Woo-jin, a slick, rich industrialist who is clearly bored with his accumulated wealth. He's also got a pacemaker that he claims he can turn off himself just in case Dae-soo decides to try and torture him, which is a cool little addition his manga counterpart does not have.
The manga's villain is Takaki Kakenuma, an equally rich and disinterested businessman who is just as enigmatic but with fewer pacemakers. Both Woo-jin and Takaki's methods are similar. After releasing his captive, he toys with him relentlessly, giving him untraceable cell phones to communicate with him and small clues to aid him in the sadistic game he set up.
The games themselves are also slightly different. In the manga, Takaki's challenge is to the death. If Goto can figure out who Takaki is and why he imprisoned him, then Takaki will kill himself. If Goto can't figure it out, Takaki will kill Goto. The timeline of this game is sort of open-ended for most of the story. In fact, a deadline isn't even introduced until the 8th volume.
Oh, right! The manga is crazy long. Its 8 volumes span over 1,600 pages worth of Goto trying to figure it all out. There are huge swaths of the manga that don't even get hinted at in the film. We get to meet Goto's old flame, the broker who made the deal to lock Goto up in the first place. He gets a job working construction for a little while. And then there are 3 or 4 entire volumes worth of a storyline where Goto teams up with his elementary teacher, who is now a crime novelist living under a new name, and the two of them work together because Takaki is kinda after both of them. Oh, and also this super weird old lady costume gets involved. Frankly, it's very weird.
But meanwhile, in the film, Woojin doesn't hide his identity at all, but instead challenges Daisu only to figure out the why. The stakes of the game are, if Daisu figures out why Woojin locked him up for 15 years, he'll kill himself. But if Daisu can't figure it out, Woojin will kill Mido, the young woman Daisu falls in love with almost immediately upon being released.
In the manga, the young woman Goto meets is named Eri. Like the movie, they meet at a restaurant, but unlike the movie, they sleep together that very night. Remember, Daisu is... well, he's a crazy animal at this point, but here's where we get very different. Like we said earlier, post-hypnotic suggestion plays a big role in both mediums. Daisu and Mido in the film, like Goto and Eri in the manga, are hypnotized so that their meetings and eventual falling in love was orchestrated by the villain. But the reasons for it are crazy different.
In the film, Daisu eventually is reminded that Woojin's sister developed a scandalous reputation, one that he assumed eventually led to her suicide. Daisu remembers that it was he who unintentionally started that rumor after witnessing her and Woojin having sex. Woojin claims she was so brokenhearted by the rumors that her brain convinced her body that it was pregnant, which seems like a crazy person denial for actually knocking up your sister. Either way, Woojin blames Daisu for her death. And where Mido fits in, well, I know we said no restraint on spoilers up top, but seriously, get out now if you haven't seen Oldboy. Okay? Okay. Mido is Daisu's daughter. Woojin's entire plan was to trick Daisu into having sex with his own daughter to avenge the loss of Woojin's own incestual relationship.
The manga, meanwhile, is much more oblique. Goto discovers that he witnessed Takaki auditioning for the school choir as a child and found himself actually moved to tears. Takaki was humiliated that somebody understood his loneliness and he just couldn't handle it. Knowing that Goto knew just how sad he was on the inside, Takaki couldn't be successful without also doubting himself. So, just your standard embarrassed as a kid, pay 300 million yen to lock a guy up for 10 years only to toy with him until he rediscovers your motives, and you have to kill yourself because he beat you at a sadistic game you made up.
In the film, Woojin also kills himself after all is said and done. However, it's more because he's gotten his revenge and there's nothing left for him to do. His plan has reduced Daisu to a mumbling shell of a man who had sex with his own daughter and subsequently cut his own tongue out. He clearly won and was clearly enjoying it, but the sadness of why he did it in the first place is still there.
Meanwhile, in the manga's epilogue, we find Goto and Eri living as a regular-as-hell couple. Eri is pregnant and Goto is a salaryman again, just doing a job for a paycheck. But a package is delivered that triggers yet another post-hypnotic suggestion in Eri, and she throws herself off the roof, but JK, it was a dream. The manga ends with Goto realizing he'll never be truly free of Takaki.
Meanwhile, in the film, we last see Daisu in a snowy forest talking with a hypnotist, attempting to bury the experience deep in his subconscious. Mido also arrives and seems to be willing to move on, although the strange atmosphere of the scene's setting seems like the whole thing might be the result of hypnotic suggestion and not in any way real. Either way, whatever part of Daisu we're watching, he seems happy enough.
So, after all of that, the manga is a story about a perverse taste of freedom. Goto always feared his true self was a monster caged up by the salaryman life. Ironically, it was 10 years of actually being caged up that gave Goto a taste of freedom, only to be tormented by the same ho-hum workaday life again.
The film, meanwhile, with Daisu's history of womanizing, is about the excruciating process of paying for your sins, no matter how big or small they are. The captivity he endured, followed by the torture at the hands of Woojin, take him from a complete lack of human connection to the most emotionally manipulative, destructive interactions a vengeance-obsessed madman can concoct. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure to check out our top 5 adaptations of all time and subscribe to Cinefix for more What's the Difference?